I came on this project to analyze the data around fathers for paternity leave. And so just press this forward. Okay. So I'll just head into the study results right now. I'm sorry that I have to do this presentation in English. If I did it in Danish, we probably would miss lunch and dinner, and no one will understand what I had to say, so bear with me. And I'm doing this for you. So initially when I saw the survey, I was interested in examining how much time, paternity leave time fathers were using, sorry, I'll stay closer, were using, and also how they were paying for their paternity leave, and what models of paternity leave fathers preferred here in Denmark. Based on this, based on the survey, those questions were fairly easy to answer and straightforward. Half of the fathers were using 1 month or more of paternity leave, which I understand is about slightly more above average. That they paid for their leave through work agreements, but I was interested in the fact that fathers were also supplementing their leave, and in fact, more than 10% were supplementing their leave by paying themselves, by using holiday and sick days, and then also working from home during their leave time. And in fact, almost 20% are using multiple forms of payments to cover the extent of their paternity leave. Next, in terms of the preferred model, in the survey they were asked, they were given 3 options: whether they would want to extend paternity leave by 3 months, whether they wanted to earmark 3 months of paternity leave specifically for fathers, or whether they would want 3 months that they can share between mother and fathers. And the majority of fathers said that they would like to extend their leave. They would either like to extend their leave or to have that leave earmarked, which led me to really thinking, 72.5% or, over 70% wanted to extend their leave. So I wanted to know, well, are there any socioeconomic or demographic differences between fathers who take longer leave versus shorter leave? And also whether there's any differences in demographic differences in how fathers are financially supporting their families during their leave. And lastly, whether these socio-demographic and socioeconomic and demographic differences influence whether they influence their preferences for the model of parental leave. I analyzed data on fathers who had answered those questions around their leave time and the model of paternity leave that they wanted, and as well as how they paid for their paternity leave. And the final sample for that was about a little bit over 1,300 fathers. And similar to the full sample that Jesper spoke about, their age really half were less than 35 years old, and the remaining were above 35, as you saw in those initial charts. And that the majority of fathers were married, had 2 or more children, and had a higher education. They worked in the private sector, and about almost 70% had their leave registered. The main outcome of interest was, as I said, the paternity leave, as well as the leave payment method and the models of paternity leave. And I looked at those exposures, those socioeconomic and socio-demographic and economic factors as potential exposures or indicators. And what I found was that for the majority of single fathers used less than a month leave, whereas married fathers were more likely to take longer leaves of upwards of a month all the way up to a year. And that across the board, fathers who had 2 or more children were taking they were taking longer leave, and also fathers who were more educated or had higher education took longer leave. Lastly, it's pretty interesting that while fathers in the private sectors were pretty split on how much leave time they were taking. Fathers in the public sector were taking longer leave time. And again, we see that when fathers took longer leave, it's more likely that their leave was going to be unregistered. And so, and some explanation for those differences show up in this next slide. So in this next slide, I'm really looking at how fathers are paying for their leave. Initially, the majority of fathers are, how do I do this? The majority of fathers are using a formal work agreement here, as you can see, across the board. But I was really interested in how the fathers who were self-paying for leave and fathers who were using multiple forms of leave. So here we see that in terms of self-paying, we have more fathers who are single, self-paying for their leave, whereas married fathers are using multiple forms, so either using just work agreements and then supplementing it with by paying themselves, maybe through savings, and using their sick days or holiday pay, and then working from home. We spoke, the challenges of working from home while on paternity leave is that, this leave time is really for fathers to bond with their children and to, to connect at home and to be a support to both mother and children. And so working at home is not necessarily a part of that, but it's definitely, I think, something to consider in terms of how they're splitting that time between, being with their child and also, taking on their work responsibilities. Also wanted to note that fathers who had a higher education were also using multiple forms of payments to support their leave. And that may have to do with, again, the types of jobs that they're taking on. As we see here, fathers in the private sector are using more formal agreements. However, fathers who are in the public sector fathers in the private sector are using more multi-forms of payments, whereas fathers in the public sector are covering a substantial amount of their paternity leave through their formal paternity work agreement. And then lastly, I wanted to look at some of these socio-demographic differences in the decisions around, the preferences around parental leave models. And across the board, I looked at all of those characteristics that I had initially mentioned, but these were the only ones that were statistically significant and moderately so. But I did want to include this slide to show that regardless of the family formation or the number of children that fathers had, the fact that they wanted to either extend their leave by 3 months or have 3 months earmarked for themselves really shows that fathers really want to use their paternity leave. It's really important to them, and that doesn't change whether they're single or they're married or they're cohabiting. A next question that came up that was not a part of the original question, but also quite important after coming here and really getting to know the Danish landscape a little bit better is this regional differences. And so we see here that the majority of fathers in the greater Copenhagen area are using 1 month, taking 1 month or longer of leave, whereas in northern Denmark, we're not seeing as much, they're not taking as much leave, so not even less than 1 month or more than 1 month. That could be because of population differences, but I'll turn it over to Jesper to kind of give us some more context on some of this data. So thank you for your time.
So we have flere time. I'll just continue. Maybe we should take it one more time. There's a lot of data, but we'll go a little bit steady through it now. You will have the survey all in Danish, It will be sent out on email together with the presentations. So we are doing both a Danish version that you will receive, so you can go through all of the graphs that we have. We have about 40 or 50 different models looking into the paternity leave, and then it will also be provided to the international researchers. One of the other things that we, before I just come into the main conclusions of the current survey, is that one of the questions that we actually ask the parents is, or the fathers is, do you experience you get the same public information about your child? And that's the discussion about digital post in Denmark, that the law actually state that both parents should have the same information. But in the survey, we actually asked the fathers, do you experience that? And that was a very high degree, more than 70% state, no, we do not get the same information from the childbirth about our children. And that's definitely something that we know that concerns all 1.2, almost 1.1 million fathers in Denmark. That's one of the issues where you can see these differences. Another thing that was very important for the fathers, in the survey we asked them to come with recommendations to the politicians, but also stating what kind of activities would they like. The main challenge for the fathers right now was that if they took the maternity leave, or the paternity leave, sorry, then there was a clear lack of these family groups or father groups in all of the local municipalities in Denmark. That was a clear statement that the father groups for fathers leave together with small children was missing in most part of the Denmark. So they didn't know where to go. They didn't know all the offers was not there. We have made a survey also just looking at the internet at all the local kommunerne in Denmark, and it was very clear that the offers was not there on the websites. They did not have offers for the fathers, or they have very few offers for the fathers. So that was the one thing that the fathers say, that is probably the things we are lacking the most here. We see it in Copenhagen, we see it in Aarhus, we see it in the big cities, that you have these fathers' kindergartens and things like that, where the fathers with small children can go, and it's a great success. We have the biggest community of fathers on leave in Copenhagen on Facebook, where everyone can just join and go in and do activities together with their child. But that's definitely the main thing that the fathers were lacking. But the conclusions we have from the report, as I said, it will be sent out to you so you can see everything. But just some of the main conclusions was that 45% has paid paternity leave in the working agreement, and that is the big companies. Of course, you have just seen last week that the ministry have launched a new campaign. So all of the big companies like Maersk, like Novo, TDC, a lot of different organizations are involved in promoting father's paternity leave. And that's definitely one of the things that we see in the survey, that information is one of the things, legal rights is the second thing, and then family economy, the family economy. That is the three main issues that decide whether the father is coming on the leave or not. There's no question about that the information campaign that has been launched by the ministry has a great impact, but it is still an issue with legal rights. It's still an issue with family economy. Christina went to Maersk yesterday and talked about their challenges and what they're doing currently and where the issues are. And they can very clearly see that if you have two parents that are both in careers, then it's more likely that the father will go on paternity leave. If you have a family where the father is supporting the family economy, then the father will not go on leave. That's one of the clear paths we see. But 42% of the fathers in the survey was having the leave on public allowance, and 20% actually stated that it was not even registered. So in the Fathers Organization, we have a lot of fathers coming in and say, well, I couldn't get the leave, or there was all different types of reasons, but 20% in our survey actually stated that it was not even registered as the father's leave. And that is the picture we see. So when we in Denmark have 8% paternity leave, and you in Sweden, Norway, Iceland has between 25 and 35% today, then you do have fathers who's for some reason cannot get this leave, but they somehow manage, they pay it themselves, they take holidays, they work from home, but when we ask them, it's very clear that they've been on leave, but they have had to pay them themselves. As I mentioned, then we asked the fathers, what is the reason for the leave period? And it was very clearly that the desire, the legal rights, and the family economy, as I stated, that was the three very clear reasons deciding whether a father will have less or more than 1 month. Another thing is, of course, culture. In South Korea right now, you have the best paternity leave opportunities for fathers. You have, I think it's 52 weeks in South Korea, but they are not being held, no one taking them. So that's a cultural issue. And you also see that in organizations like Maersk, that in Denmark and the Nordic region, right now fathers are taking more leave, and that's definitely one of the regions in the world where we see the biggest change right now going on. But in India, a father has suddenly got 1 week in Maersk, and he said, yeah, that's really good because then I can support the mother. So, and that's just different. That's how an Indian person looks at it, where you in Denmark, in Sweden, Norway, Scandinavia, are beginning to see fathers that say, well, yes, I just love this, and of course I want to do this, and we are both shared parents, and you see that both in the mothers and fathers. When we ask the fathers what was the best with the leave, why with having this leave, there was a very clear path that the love and association relation between the father and the child was the key issue for the fathers. And as I mentioned earlier, we see now in the Father Organization a lot of fathers having 3 months to 12 months paternity leave, and we see exactly the same patterns as we normally know from the mothers. They have the same relations with their children. They have the same feelings, they have the same concerns that we just 5-10 years ago, we saw that mainly at the mothers. But now we suddenly have fathers who's concerned about these things. And on the other side, we see career women right now that due to the culture are very concerned. Well, I have given the father 6 months leave or even 12 months leave, as we see now, and I'm really worried that is this good for my child? So that's the women's concern right now, is that is this leave actually good for my child? What we see from the quite many fathers we talk to and also women is that it has no difference. If the child has this love and care from 2 parents and quality time, even though one of the parents are working, then the family will be more happy and the child will be a happy child. So there's not that big reason for concern. So that's a clear pattern we also see. The shortcoming stated by the father is also very clear. It is legal rights, it is the financing, and it is the information. You have a lot of fathers who's not even aware that they have these rights. They're coming into us, they're coming into the social system in Denmark and just asking, well, I'm going to have a child. what are my rights? Do I have any rights? They have no clue about this. We see that all the time, and what is best for the child. And then you of course have also young couples today, where the young mother is at the university and state, well, I'm not going to look after this child alone, so you better take half of it. Or we see the families where you have the third, fourth child born, and where the mother say, well, this time it's your turn, and the mother has a career. And the fathers there who's taking these 9 to 12 months today is still a few of them, but we have a lot of fathers taking 3 months, 6 months now. They are very happy about this. So that is some of the conclusions you will read from the report, and just to take a few more of it. And that's related to information also. 45% of the father state that they did not even know that they can take parental leave until the child is 9 years old. So if the public allowance for the leave is used within the first 6 months or 12 months, then they are actually not able to use it until at a later stage, because it's already been used. So that's an issue. There's a lot of today. You can both have flexible parental leave, and you can also have parental leave for the father and mother until the child is 9 years old. But 55%, and that is the general picture, they have no clue about the rights. They have no clue about that they can actually save this many years. And then, as Christine also showed, that in our survey, we didn't, of course, talk to all of Denmark. The persons, the fathers who's answering our survey was fathers that was definitely interested in this area, had an opinion about it, but we could very clearly see that we both have fathers that just was very much opposed the father's leave, and also the fathers that was really against and say, no, it's good, the father will have 2 weeks and that's fine, and definitely the government should not in any way make any laws about that. So we have the picture there, but what was important is, of course, that 70% of the fathers in the survey would actually have a longer period. They would like a longer period, and I think that even if we go back 1 year, 2 years from now, we didn't even see this clear picture. Suddenly, because of the information campaigns, because of what's going on locally, what's going on in the families, the culture is now changing, and it's probably changing more rapidly within the next 5 years ahead. That's definitely the picture we see right now. And also, as Christine mentioned, then we did ask them about this political question in Denmark. Should we not have the earmarked paternity leave? Should it be extended period? Should we have a transfer model? And the transfer model is where you give both the parents at least 3 months, and then you give the child, you give the child 3 months with each parent, and then you get the parent 6 months that they can decide, so of this 12 months period. And you have the earmarked and you have the extension. And it was very clear from the persons that we spoke to here that they suddenly understand the benefits of the earmarked solution, legal issue. But that's a political question whether we should have that or not. It's definitely the model that will have the most impact in society, as we've seen in the rest of the Nordic countries on this. And then, as I mentioned lastly, but then 50% of the fathers actually stated they were missing local family groups and father groups for their children. So that's definitely something we're going to work on in the Fathers Association and try to talk to different levels. That's a very clear request that you will see in the report. But as mentioned, you will get it in Danish, and we provided also the data to different types of researchers and universities around the world, experts, It's also going to be looked at in the European Commission in some of their statement. Some of you might know that the European Council in 2015 made a resolution for gender equality for fathers, and that was the network we involved in was part of that, also doing the expert knowledge in that. But the European Commission right now has proposed that every child should have at least 4 months paid leave for each parent all around Europe. So that's a European Commission recommendation. There has been a European Council resolution stating 8 different items for fathers and children that they say this is something we have to do. Parental leave is one of them. So there's a lot of fights between the politicians in different countries right now whether they will be opposed this or against this. So that's some of the discussions we have in the future ahead. But definitely what we see in the Fathers Association is we see what we call a boom. We do right now see the early stages of an explosion in the father's paternity leave, and that's of course very good for the children. It's very good for the mothers. Their equal rights and equal payments and all that. But it's definitely also a good thing for the fathers, looking at public health in general, looking at how can we make sure that we have parents that work together in families. And as Marlin showed us earlier, then it doesn't really matter whether you have 2 parents living together or not today. There's a difference for the child, no question about that. But as long as they work together, then the child will actually have this good life and have good psychological health. So that's some of the key findings. Okay, that was about the report now.